I love watching this guy just destroy mainstream media, legacy media reporters. It's so much fun. And I happen to know that Trump actually loves when he would do these interviews. He just enjoys it thoroughly, watching him dismantle people. This is going to be like the best 20 minutes of my day.
Pete Hegseth, it was a tie. Bipartisan opposition, smallest margin since the job was created. You had to break that tie. If the nominee can't unite your party, how's he going to lead 3 million people?
Well, look, I think Pete is a disruptor. And a lot of people don't like that disruption. But, Margaret,
Yeah, because the gravy train is about to end. The gravy train at the Pentagon is about to end. So when Trump wants to end the war in Ukraine, when Trump wants to end the wars in the Middle East, when he wants to reposition 20,000 troops out of Europe into the American theater to close the southern border, and he already did. He brought a couple thousand Marines to the U.S. southern border. They don't like that because the military-industrial complex needs money. They need trillions of dollars.
Disruption is incredibly necessary. If you think about all of those bipartisan massive votes, we have to ask ourselves, what did they get us? They got us a country where we fought many wars over the last 40 years but haven't won a war about as long as I've been alive. They've got us a military with a major recruitment crisis, a procurement price crisis.
Why do liberals care about that? So when you put in all these DEI things inside of the Pentagon, right, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and you allow soldiers to go get transgender surgeries, it becomes a place where people don't want to work. And when you have to literally lower the standards for physical fitness, so these people are like fat bastards and couldn't even run up a hill. We are not the strongest military in the world anymore. We've literally, as we've talked to Colonel Douglas McGregor on our show, our military has become in many ways a joke because of the leadership at the Pentagon.
That's totally dysfunctional, where we buy airplanes for billions and billions of dollars, terrible cost overruns, the delivery dates are always delayed. So we need a big change. Now, admittedly, there are people who don't like that big change, but it is necessary, and it's explicitly what Donald J. Trump ran on, and I think part of the reason why the American people elected him their 47th president.
So the main objective is changing all of that? That it's going to be Pete Hegseth alone?
I'd say
Yeah. I love these dumb questions. So the main objective is changing everything? Yeah. The Pentagon is a disaster. It's an absolute disaster. It's totally anachronistic. The Pentagon was built after World War II, and it still functions like it did after World War II. It does not function like it should in 2025. It is an absolute disaster.
The main problem the main thing that we want Pete Hegseth to do is to fix the problems at the Department of Defense. And unfortunately, there are many. We've gotten into way too many wars that we don't have a plan for winning. We've gotten into way too many misadventures that we shouldn't have got into in the very first place. And our procurement process, Margaret, is incredibly broken. We're in an era.
Decisions.
Well, of course, they're policy decisions, but they're also logistical and implementation decisions. If you look at where we are with the rise of artificial intelligence, with the rise of drone technology and drone warfare, we have to really, top to bottom, change the way that we fund the procurement of weapons, the way that we arm our troops. This is
maybe instead of $40 million aircraft that don't work, that have taken 8 to 10 years to build and don't work and continue to have crashes and are already in many ways obsolete from the battlefield, given the future of warfare being drone warfare, not with human beings inside of them. I mean, there's literally bases in Oklahoma where U.S. Air Force drone operators sit and operate the drones on the battlefield in the Middle East. So we don't need these massive procurements of, $40-30 million aircraft that don't work. He's absolutely right about that. And also, did you hear about the wars? How many boondoggle wars are we in currently? We're all over the world. We're in Africa. We've got 50,000 troops in the Middle East. We've got 20,000 in Europe. Across Asia, what are we doing? We have over 900 military bases in the United States, making a lot of people rich on the military contractor side.
Major period of disruption, and we think Pete Hegseth is the guy to lead the job. Now, there's another element to this, Margaret, too, which is we believe that military morale, at least until the election of President Trump, was historically low. You had the Army missing recruitment goals by tens of thousands of soldiers, and already recruitment is starting to pick up because Pete Hegseth is fundamentally a warfighter's leader at the Department of Defense. He is a guy who sees not through the perspective of the generals or the bureaucrats. He looks at things through the perspective of the men and women that we send off to fight in our wars.
Both the Wall Street Journal and the National Review, conservative publications, as you know, have been critical of Tulsi Gabbard. The Review called her an atrocious nominee who deserves to be defeated. They compared her defense of Edward Snowden, the fugitive.
By the way, these are neocon publications. Okay, so when they say these are, she throws in there, this is a conservative publication, the National Review. Okay, these are neocon publications. They want war. They would love nothing. It's the Bill Kristols of the war. They want war in Washington, D.C., and these are publications that are mouthpieces of that. The Wall Street Journal, the same. It's an extension of the intelligence community, so they just sort of throw out the Wall Street Journal is a conservative publication, right? It's run by it has deep state connections, just like the New York Times, just like the Washington Post. To call them conservative is just ridiculous. There's no daylight between Democrats and Republicans. The warmongers, the neocons, and the warmongers, there's no daylight between them.
Stole U.S. secrets to an attorney general who thinks the mob gets a bad rap. Her refusal to accept U.S. intelligence findings that Assad gassed his own people, they said, was like a nominee for OMB director not being able to count. Does any of this give you pause?
Okay, let me just say something about Assad gassing his own people. That has been debunked widely. What happened in Duma was a complete fabrication and has been widely debunked. You can watch my interviews with Piers Robinson. You can read you can read the report on it by the OPCW on the fake gas attack. It didn't happen. It was faked. It's been widely debunked. So why is Margaret sitting there like, so Tulsi Gabbard doesn't believe it happened. She was actually outspoken against that. She knew that it was a boondoggle by the Obama administration to get us into a war in Syria. She knew that. So she spoke out against it. We need more people like Tulsi Gabbard speaking out about the fake Syrian gas attack and these other false flags that get us into wars. So Margaret's continuing to parrot the same fake news media garbage line about gassing, that Assad gassed his own people in Duma. He didn't. It's been widely debunked.
Putting her in charge of the U.S. intelligence community, yes or no?
No, Margaret, look, these are publications that attacked Donald J. Trump obsessively, but those publications don't determine who the president is, the American people do.
Him.
And Donald J. Trump is the person who determines who his cabinet is, not these publications that I think, frankly, have lost relevance.
The Senate will ultimately decide.
Well, the Senate will provide advice and consent, as is its constitutional obligation, but I feel confident that Tulsi Gabbard will ultimately get through. Two things that are important to know about Tulsi. First of all, she is a career military servant who's had a classification at the highest levels for nearly 2 decades. She has impeccable character, impeccable record of service. And she also is a person who I think is going to bring some trust back to the intelligence services. The bureaucrats at our intelligence services have gotten completely out of control. They've been part of the weaponization of our political system, the weaponization of our justice system. We need to have good intelligence services who keep us safe. But part of that is restoring trust in those services, and we think Tulsi is the right person to do it. That's
she
why the
doesn't
president.
Trust those intelligence services.
She recognizes that the bureaucrats have gotten out of control, and we
need
somebody there who's going to ring.
Who trusts the intelligence services? The CIA, the most corrupt organization in the world. They literally create coups around the world and kill people. I mean, look what happened in Ukraine. The CIA-backed coup in Ukraine in 2014 that overthrew that government, placed a Western-backed puppet government. In Libya, the list is endless. Their involvement in assassinating JFK. Who trusts the CIA? Because I guess the CBS News does. By the way, if you want a little history of CBS News, of course, and Operation Mockingbird, the Mockingbird media. They were infiltrated by the CIA. CBS News and the New York Times, the two of them, are the shining example of how the intelligence community has completely infiltrated those operations. So I love her virtue signaling about, Tulsi doesn't trust the intelligence community. Yeah, it's shocking, isn't it?
them in and return those services to their core mission of identifying information that's going to keep us safe.
You campaigned on lowering prices for consumers. We've seen all of these executive orders. Which one?
But why are prices 5 days after Trump is in office? Why are prices still high? It's been 5 days. It's been 6 days. Why are prices still high?
Lowers prices.
We have done a lot, and there have been a number of executive orders that have caused already jobs to start coming back into our country, which is a core part of lowering prices. More capital investment, more job creation in our economy is one of the things that's going to drive down prices for all consumers, but also raise wages so that people can afford to buy the things that they need. If you look at our slate of executive orders, no, Margaret, prices are going to come down, but it's going to take a little bit of time.
I mean, even Trump admitted that he didn't think he'd get grocery prices down like fast. It's not something that just happens overnight. I mean, when you have freaking gas prices that are up, you're paying way more for diesel. You're hauling all of these products. All of the prices for every part of the supply chain has gone up. That's called inflation. That's exactly what has happened under the Biden administration.
Right? The president has been president for all of 5 days. I think that in those 5 days, he's accomplished more than Joe Biden did in 4 years. It's been an incredible breakneck pace of activity. We're going to work with Congress. We're, of course, going to have more executive orders, and we're going to try the way that you lower prices is that you encourage more capital investment into our country. And you ask specifically, what executive order is going to help lower prices? All of the stuff that we've done on energy, to explore more energy reserves, to develop more energy resources in the United States of America. One of the main drivers of increased prices under the Biden administration is that we had a massive increase in the energy prices. Donald Trump has already taken multiple executive actions that are going to lower energy prices, and I do believe that means consumers are going to see lower prices at the pump and at the grocery store, but it's going to take a little bit of time. Rome wasn't built in a day, and while we've done a whole lot, we can't undo all of the damage of Joe Biden's presidency in 4 days.
Well, there are a lot of things that contributed to higher energy prices, and there was record oil and gas production.
Yes, Joe Biden did many terrible things to lead to an increase in prices. I agree, Margaret.
No, but all the things you experience at the grocery store are what people touch and feel. That's what you were talking about, bacon on the campaign trail.
Of course, of course.
Those things, when do consumers actually get to touch and feel a difference in their lives?
Well, Margaret, how does bacon get to the grocery store? It comes on trucks that are fueled.
You guys have been there for 5 days. Why is my bacon not cheaper? I love it. I mean, the Biden administration with their massive Inflation Reduction Act, which did nothing, which actually increased inflation and drove up the national debt by $2 trillion, was an absolute boondoggle for green energy companies, Washington friends and insiders, and money for Ukraine and money for Israel. Did nothing. It did nothing. So you printed more money, all of this fake money. No wonder. I mean, and he's absolutely right. I mean, if you want to bring investment into the United States, lower taxes. Trump wants to lower taxes down to 15% for businesses. I'm telling you what, I've been studying a lot of different socialist countries' history right now. I've been looking into Sweden and Norway and really studying. I encourage you to read Rand Paul's great book on socialism. It's really fascinating. But when you see what those countries did, it immediately stunted their growth when they raised corporate tax rates and investment dried up in those countries. And taxes drove out businesses out of those countries. And really, when Trump lowered taxes the last time to 21%, businesses flooded into the United States. Now he's going to lower it to 15%. Holy smoke. I'm telling you, I said to my wife the other day, I said, if he lowers it to 15%, game over. The United States will become the epicenter for business. It will become a massive amount of growth thanks to businesses moving to the United States at that low tax rate. It would be a game changer. So we'll see what happens, but he's right on that.
Buy diesel fuel. If the diesel's way too expensive, the bacon's going to become more expensive. How do we grow the bacon? Our farmers need energy to produce it. So if we lower energy prices, we are going to see lower prices for consumers, and that is what we're trying to fight for.
Well, the flurry of executive orders, most of them weren't about the economy. Many of them
were, though, Margaret. We had, I think we've taken
promise
over
of tariffs by February 1st.
We've taken over 200 executive actions, some executive orders, other executive actions. Again, this is in less than a week, and a lot of them were focused on the economy, bring investment into our country and lowering energy prices. We've also focused on safety, restoring public safety, ending weaponization of the Department of Justice. We've done a lot. And I think the president is to be commended for actually coming in and doing something with this incredible mandate the American people get.
Did you guys see his President Trump's approval ratings? Exploded over the past few days, the highest they've ever been for President Trump. So I think Americans are excited about these, these executive actions. Liberals are not. You're seeing Hollywood freakouts. You're seeing like Selena Gomez crying on camera. But when you're seeing actual ICE enforcement agents who are rounding up rapists, today they arrested over 9 child rapists. They were convicted child rapists that the Biden administration let out. Also, one of them had a sex trafficking record, multiple DUIs, criminals, murderers, but child rapists. Fentanyl distributor from Honduras. Just one. I'm picking out like 10 examples here. There are hundreds of examples. So in your community, when you found out that child rapists have been, like, what person would be against having a child rapist arrested? I'm sure there's people in the pedophile Hollywood that wouldn't be keen on it. But for the rest of us, yeah. Oh, you arrested some child rapists that live down the street. Great.
Gave him. He's not sitting in the Oval Office doing nothing. He's doing the American people's business, and I think they're going to see a lot of good effects from it.
Well, a lot of these announcements have yet to take effect.
Sure.
The president did say he wants to do something with an executive order in relation to federal emergency response. He said he may reform or eliminate FEMA. Instead of sending emergency responders, he may start to send a percentage of money to states to take care of themselves. FEMA has specialized expertise that some of these states just don't have in their arsenal. And
I wish
how
that
will states who are lower income states, the Mississippis, the Kentuckys, the Alabamas, be able to do this for themselves without federal help?
Well, the president, to be clear, is not saying we're going to leave anybody behind. He's saying that in the way that we administer these resources, some of which is coming from the federal level, some of which is coming from the state level.
So as an example, North Carolina was destroyed by Hurricane Helene, right? Up in the mountains, destroyed. And the FEMA response was abysmal. Americans had to go into the mountains and help other people. And I lived in West Virginia for years as a news reporter, and I was there during 200-year floods that happened in 1 year of each other in the early 2000s, I think, like 2001, 2002. Totally devastated those communities, absolutely devastated. FEMA was anemic response, nothing. It was awful. These people lost schools, lost their homes, lost their mobile homes, absolutely devastated. FEMA, awful response. So what are you talking about? That there's been some amazing federal response here that we have to worry about? Are you kidding me? And we know from Hurricane Helene in North Carolina and eastern Tennessee, there are people still living in tents. So what is this amazing FEMA response you're talking about here? Americans had to step up and try to help these people, but these people are still without homes. They have nothing. So I don't want to hear that somehow now it's going to really hurt these low income states.
We've got to get the bureaucrats out of the way and get the aid to the people who need it most.
But these are the first responders.
Margaret, you talk about the expertise from FEMA. FEMA in North Carolina, in California, in Florida, with some of the hurricanes, has often been a disaster.
Yes.
It's not because we don't have good people at FEMA. It's because bureaucratic red tape and garbage prevents the rapid deployment of resources to the people who need it most.
But the states are now going to have to do this themselves?
The president is trying to encourage us to reform the way that we deliver emergency.
They already have. Wait a minute. FEMA's response has been so great. Now you're telling me the states will have to do what they've done? There's been no response. The FEMA response has been crap.
Response in a way that gets resources to the people who need it.
So don't take him literally, is what you're saying.
We should take the president at his word that FEMA needs desperate reform, because it does. Margaret, when I went to North Carolina as VP-elect, but before we were sworn in, people would talk about how FEMA would get resources, food, medicine, water, to a warehouse, but then would have no plan to get it from the warehouse to the people in the mountains who were literally starving and thirsting to death. We can do so much better, and under Donald Trump's leadership, we will.
But they work with the state and local officials.
They often don't work well enough.
And yeah, they don't.
Going to be on the state and local officials?
The FEMA management officials don't work well enough with the state and local officials to get resources to the people who need it. We should expect, and this is, I think, one of the fundamental premises of President Trump's leadership, the American people should expect more of their government. When there's a terrible disaster, they should expect food, medicine, and water to get to the people who need it.
You know, Thomas Paine talked about government, you know, if you're a libertarian, pretty much like I am, which is you want limited government. Like a necessary evil, like the bare minimum of government, right? To keep criminals running the streets and protect its people. That's what the government is there for. It's to protect us. That is its number one function. That's it. And all of the DEI and all the other garbage that gets piled on top of it. No. It's there to protect us, right? It's a necessary evil so that we don't have chaos. And they have failed at their most necessary base requirement of government, which is to protect us here in the United States. But we can send $200 billion to Ukraine to rebuild their country. We can send another $8 billion to Israel like we did last week before Trump came into office. For what? They have a budget surplus and a space program in Israel. But these people can't, they're sleeping in tents and they have no food and water in North Carolina.
When there's a terrible fire in California, the fire hydrants ought to actually turn on. I am sick of the American people having such low expectations for their government. They should demand more of us because this is the greatest country in the world, and that's what Donald Trump's leadership promises to bring back.
So still count on the federal government, but watch that space. Let me ask you about another area that you campaign.
Such a smug, like legacy media. Just so smug. Disgusting, frankly. So, okay. So do count on the government. Okay, let's move along. She's got to get in these like little digs here, in totally ignoring what he just said.
On quite a lot, and there was a flurry of activity on, and that has to do with immigration.
Sure.
The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops this week condemned some of the executive orders signed by President Trump, specifically those allowing immigration and customs.
I'm sorry. The Catholic bishops. You mean just like the Catholic Charities? The Catholic Charities, which takes millions of dollars from the federal government and has facilitated child trafficking in the United States? Oh, yeah. Look it up. Dive deep into the Catholic Charities. So you want to lecture about the Association of Catholic Bishops? This will be good. Let's go.
Enforcement to enter churches and to enter schools. Do you personally support the idea of conducting a raid or enforcement action in a church service, at a school?
Well, let me address this. Of course, if you have a person who is convicted of a violent crime, whether they're an illegal immigrant or a non-illegal immigrant, you have to go and get that person to protect the public safety. That's not unique to immigration. But let me just address this particular issue, Margaret, because as a practicing Catholic, I was actually heartbroken by that statement. And I think that the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops needs to actually look in the mirror a little bit and recognize that when they receive over $100 million to help resettle illegal immigrants, are they worried about humanitarian concerns, or are they actually worried about their bottom line? We are going to...
Did he really just say that? Holy smokes. As a Catholic myself, he says... You need to look in the mirror. You've received $100 million for illegal immigrant resettling as an NGO, like taking money from under the Biden administration. And so you're criticizing the Trump administration because they're coming in and they're seizing these illegal immigrants. You know what they are? They're cutting off your funding. They're cutting off the spigot for all of these corrupt NGOs. Yeah, I'm talking to you, HIAS. The Hebrew International Aid Society. I'm looking at you, Catholic Charities. All of these NGOs that have facilitated the child sex trafficking operation into the United States. Look it up. There's congressional testimony on it. If you think I'm making it up, you're wrong. Do your homework on it. But I know many of you who watch this show, you already know that. So, wow, he really just said that?
Force immigration law. We're going to protect the American people.
Yeah.
Donald Trump promised to do that. And I believe the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, if they're worried about the humanitarian costs of immigration enforcement, let them talk about the children who have been sex trafficked because of the wide open border of Joe Biden.
You personally
let them talk
support
about
them going into
people like
schools
Laken
and
Riley
churches.
who were brutally murdered. I support us doing law enforcement against violent criminals, whether they're illegal immigrants or anybody else, in a way that keeps us safe. Let me ask this question, Margaret. Let's separate the immigration issue. If you had a violent murderer in a school, of course I want law enforcement to go and get that person out.
Of course.
So what's the point of the question?
What's the point of your stupid question? So her whole thing is about disrupting a frickin' church service? Who gives a rat's ass? You ever been to a church service? I've been to hundreds of them. There's always disruptions in a church service. There's a crying baby. There's someone falling. There's someone dropping a phone. There's always disruptions. So you're worried. You're more worried about there's a sex trafficker who's sitting in one of the pews, and ICE has figured out that that's where they are at that moment. Yeah, come on in. Come on into the church service. Take this person out of here. Or, you know what, just wait till the church service is over and they walk out the door and you grab them. I don't give a rat's ass. I don't care at all that you're disrupting a church service. And yeah, go into a school. If the school is being disrupted, I hope my child's school would be disrupted if they knew that a sex trafficker, a murderer was hanging out in the school. Go get his ass.
You changed the regulation this week. That's the point of the question.
Exactly.
Giving the authority to go into churches and go into schools.
We empowered law enforcement to enforce the law everywhere to protect Americans.
Effect, a chilling effect,
oh, it's
arguably,
a chilling
to people to not send their kids to school.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we don't. Now parents are going to stop sending their children to school because it's become safer. You are an idiot. You are an idiot.
I really hope it has a chilling effect on illegal immigrants coming into our country.
You think the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops are actively hiding criminals?
I think the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops has frankly not been a good partner in common sense immigration enforcement that the American people voted for. And I hope, again, as a devout Catholic, that they'll do better.
There are 5 legal challenges already to one of the other immigration actions, the order on birthright citizenship. A federal judge appointed by Ronald Reagan, I think you'd agree, has some conservative credentials, paused the order to end birthright citizenship, calling it blatantly unconstitutional. How do you reconcile this challenge to the 14th Amendment to the Constitution?
So I obviously disagree with that judge, and these things, some of them will be litigated. That's the nature of our constitutional system. But here's the basic idea of President Trump's view on this. If you are a lawful permanent resident or a legal immigrant who plans to stay, your children, of course, should become American citizens. But let's say you're the child of an ambassador. You don't become...
But that's not part of it.
Well, that is
already a carve-out having
an
to do
important
with kids of
principle.
diplomats.
But we're saying that carve-out should apply to anybody who doesn't plan to stay here. If you come here on vacation and you have a baby in an...
Yeah, he's making the point that we've already carved out because it would make no sense constitutionally if you're here as a child of an ambassador that you wouldn't then become, like, if they're French ambassador to the United States and you have a baby here, that you wouldn't also become an American citizen. We've already have those carve-outs because it wouldn't make sense for that. So what he's saying is we shouldn't have the carve-outs for you to have like a vacation baby. By the way, I lived in Europe for a while, and one of our friends, we random associate, not like an association, not friend really. She told us, she was I think she was Japanese or I don't know, but she's like, yeah, it was in my 8th month, and we wanted to have my son to have American citizenship, so we flew to America into California and gave birth, and so he got American citizenship. And like we're like, what? Do you live there? Like, have you ever lived there? Like, she's like, no, we never lived there. We just wanted him to have that opportunity. So she flew there, stayed in a hotel for like 3 or 2 months to give birth to this child, gets citizenship for her son. We're like, well, have you been back since? And she's like, no. But, maybe he'll want to go to college there when he's 18. Like, that's how you, what? No. That should not be allowed. And that's the carve out he's talking about here.
American hospital, that baby doesn't become an American citizen. If you're an illegal alien and you come here temporarily, hopefully, Your child does not become an American citizen by virtue of just having been born on American soil. It's a very basic principle in American immigration law that if you want to become an American citizen and you've done it the right way, and the American people in their collective wisdom have welcomed you into our national community, then you become a citizen. But temporary residents, people who come in here, whether legally or illegally, and don't plan to stay, their children should become American citizens. I don't know any country that does that or why we would be different.
Well, this is a country founded by immigrants.
Well, this is a country founded by... This is a very unique country, and it was founded by some immigrants.
Look at her little head bob, like she thinks she's so.
And don't plan to stay. Their children should become American citizens. Well, I don't know any country that does that or why we would be different.
Well, this is a country founded by immigrants.
Well, this is a country founded by. This is a very unique country, and it was founded by some immigrants and some settlers. But just because we were founded by immigrants doesn't mean that 240 years later that we have to have the dumbest immigration policy in the world. No country says that temporary visitors, their children, will be given complete access to the benefits and blessings of American citizenship. America should actually look out for the interests of our citizens first, and that means, again, if you're here permanently and lawfully, your kid becomes an American citizen. If you're not here permanently, if you're not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States and don't plan to be, why would we make those people's children American citizens permanently?
I want to ask you about refugee admissions, which were just suspended by the president. That has nothing to do with the U.S. border. Refugee screening takes 18 to 24 months to go through. They are heavily vetted.
What? They're heavily vetted? Are you out of your mind? I mean, we've done countless shows on how they're not heavily vetted at all. And you literally could use the frickin' Customs and Border Patrol One app, CB1 app, I think it's called. And you put in, you just like punch in a little bit of information and you're immediately like processed as a refugee, amnesty, and you're able to come right to the United States. There's no vetting. And there's no follow-up. Heavily vetted. What world are you living in?
Literally at the airport this week were thousands of Afghans, some of whom had worked with the United States government and were promised to come here. When you talked to us in August, you said, I don't think we should abandon anybody who's been properly vetted and helped us. Do you stand by that?
Well, Margaret, I don't agree that all these immigrants or all these refugees have been properly vetted. In fact, we know that there are cases of people who allegedly were properly vetted and then were literally planning terrorist attacks on our country. That happened during the campaign, if you may remember.
Yes.
So clearly not all of these foreign nationals have been properly vetted.
But there are 30,000 people in the pipeline, Afghan refugees.
But my primary concern as the vice president, Margaret, is to look after the American people. And now that we know that we have vetting problems with a lot of these refugee programs, we absolutely cannot unleash thousands of unvetted people into our country.
These people are vetted. These people are vetted.
Just like the guy who planned a terror.
These people are vetted. I've done my homework on this. These people have been vetted by the Biden administration. The Biden administration has had zero vetting process. As we've interviewed J.J. Carroll, former 24-year veteran with the Customs and Border Patrol. The vetting process is non-existent. He's walked us through it on this show. Go back and seek those interviews. There's no vetting process. And by the way, why is Afghanistan a total disaster? Because we destroyed their country. So we need to stop destroying other countries and creating refugees, like we've done now in Syria with a CIA-backed attack by Al-Qaeda and ISIS, which is now running Syria. So we should take in Syrian refugees because we've destroyed Syria, just like we did in Libya and Honduras. How many other places will the United States continue to destroy? What J.D. Vance talked about very early in this interview when he said, we need to stop all of these follies around the world where we're like getting involved in these wars. We need to stop these wars. If you stop the wars and allow their countries to run themselves, we won't have these refugees trying to get into the United States.
Terrorist attack in Oklahoma a few months ago, he was allegedly properly vetted, and many people in the media and the Democratic Party said that he was properly vetted. Clearly he wasn't. I don't want my children to share a neighborhood with people who are not properly vetted, and because I don't want it for my kids, I'm not going to force any other American citizens' kids to do that either.
No, and that was a very particular case. It wasn't clear if he was radicalized when he got here or while he was living here.
I don't really care, Margaret. I don't want that person.
That was a real particular case. We're not really sure if he was radicalized before he came here or after he got here. Who cares? And she's citing one particular case. I mean, she's going to try to, okay, well, we could show you thousands of them.
In my country, and I think most Americans agree.
Like he says,
I'm not going to force any other American citizens' kids to do that either.
No, and that was a very particular case. It wasn't clear if he was radicalized when he got here or while he was living here.
I don't really care, Margaret. I don't want that person in my country, and I think most Americans agree with me.
2 weeks ago, you were on Fox News, and you said, if you protested peacefully on January 6th and had Merrick Garland's Department of Justice treat you like a gang member, you should be pardoned. If you committed violence on that day, obviously you shouldn't be pardoned. Did you counsel the president against these blanket pardons for 1,500 people?
Well, Margaret, I noticed,
including those who committed violence.
Margaret, I noticed that you cut off the thing that I said immediately after that. The full quote is that, of course, there are gray areas. And here's the nature of the gray area. Merrick Garland's Department of Justice denied constitutional protections in the prosecutions. There were double standards in how sentences were applied to the J6 protesters versus other groups. What the president said consistently on the campaign is that he was going to look at a case-by-case basis, and that's exactly what we did. We looked at 1,600 cases, and the thing that came out of it, Margaret, is that there was a massive denial of due process of liberty, and a lot of people were denied their constitutional rights. The president believes that, I believe that, and I think he made the right decision.
Yeah, a lot of them. I mean, we've interviewed countless J6 survivors, J6 defendants. I say J6 survivors, but yeah, I mean, being in prison for how many years? Yeah, we interviewed a number of them here on the show. And it was unbelievable what rights they were not allowed to have access to under the Constitution. Evidence held against them that they weren't able to see, evidence withheld from them, held in prison without process for months and months and months before they ever got a hearing. Like, what? These are terrorists or something? And yeah, there were certainly violent people there that day. But also, as I think President Trump, and I'm not speaking for him, but President Trump made the point that, okay, if someone broke a window 4 years ago, they've been in prison now for 4 years. Like, that's enough. And they also didn't have the due process that was afforded them under the United States Constitution. Like, okay, pardon. So, but the fact she's saying, oh, this was blanket. You guys didn't even look at these cases. And J.D. Vance is saying, no, we looked at all of them. We looked at 1,600 of them. We went through 1,600 of them. This wasn't blanket on a case-by-case basis, but she thinks she knows somehow. I guess she was in the room where it happened.
Daniel Rodriguez used an electroshock weapon against a policeman who was dragged out of the defensive line by plunging it into the officer's neck. He was imprisoned, sentenced to 12 years, 7 months. He got a pardon. Ronald Maccabee hit a cop while wearing reinforced brass knuckle gloves, and he held one down on the ground as other rioters assailed the officer for over 20 seconds, causing a concussion. If you stand with law enforcement, how can you call these people unjustly imprisoned?
Margaret, you're separating, there's an important issue here. There's what the people actually did on January the 6th, and we're not saying that everybody did everything perfectly. And then what did Merrick Garland's Department of Justice do in unjustly prosecuting well over 1,000 Americans in a way that was politically motivated?
Is violence like that against a police officer ever justified?
Violence against a police officer is not justified, but that doesn't mean that you should have Merrick Garland's weaponized Department of Justice expose you to incredibly unfair.
What about the people that were there? The police officers that shot individuals in the head with rubber bullets, and started. You can actually watch the video of them starting the fracas on the west side of the building that afternoon. In addition to which, all of the FBI informants and agitators who were there, opening gates and pushing people through, encouraging them to go in and cause violence. What about those people?
Process to denial of constitutional rights, and frankly, to a double standard that was not applied to many people, including, of course, the Black Lives Matter rioters who killed over 24 people and never had the weight of a weaponized Department of Justice come against them. The pardon power is not just for
still
people
destroyed
who are angels or
because of all the
who are
riots.
perfect. And of course, we love our law enforcement and want people to be peaceful with everybody, but especially with our good cops. That's a separate issue from what Merrick Garland's Department of Justice did. We rectified a wrong, and I stand by it.
I'm being told we're out of time, but I want to quickly
Sure.
ask you, the richest men in the world were at that Capitol on Inauguration Day, heads of Amazon, Google, Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook. In August, you told us Google and Facebook are too big. We ought to take the Teddy Roosevelt approach, break them up. Don't let them control what people are allowed to say. They've now donated to the Trump inauguration. Are you still going to break up big tech?
So, you know who else was at the inauguration was my mom, and a lot of people who just supported the president and fought every single day to get his election. And
they
to make
gave $1 million
possible
each to the inauguration.
Well, there were a lot of people who didn't give $1 million to the inauguration.
They got pretty good seating.
Who were on that stage, Margaret. They didn't have as good a seating as my mom and a lot of other people who were there to support us. But look, we believe fundamentally that big tech does have too much power, and there are two ways they can go about this. They can either respect Americans' constitutional rights, they can stop engaging in censorship, and if they don't, you can be absolutely sure that Donald Trump's leadership is not going to look too kindly on them.
So they're still on notice?
They're very much on notice.
Wow.
Pete Hegseth?
Very much on notice. Great. You're going to censor people? We're going to come after you. Just because you donated $1 million to the inauguration doesn't matter. We're going to still look at you and come after you. I hope that I certainly hope that's the case. But overall, holy smokes. Like, no wonder Trump loves him doing interviews, because well, first of all, he's just too smart for them. He knows these things backwards and forwards. I mean, I think in many ways, you're probably looking at him as maybe the 48th president of the United States. Can you guys name anybody else on the Republican side who could step up like that? And who's that smart? I mean, a Yale graduate, served with distinction in the United States military, U.S. Marine. I read his book. I don't know if you guys had a chance to read Hillbilly Elegy, and it's an eye-opening book to see where he came from. And it's a humbling book, really, as well, too. So, wow. Yeah, I think you could be looking at the next president of the United States. Just imagine for a second, 3.5 years from now, when 3 years from now, when campaigning really would start, and Donald Trump would be campaigning for J.D. Vance. Like, how do you stop that? You don't. Who's going to primary J.D. Vance? And they pretty much don't. When you've got a president and vice president, they pretty much stand aside most of the time. I think he could be 48th president of the United States. On top of which, he's not Mike Pence, right? And we remember how Mike Pence burned Donald Trump. And right now, in fact, Mike Pence is actively campaigning against Donald Trump's picks at the DNI. Tulsi Gabbard, for instance, and others, actively spending money against Donald Trump. That's Mike Pence. Talk about a turncoat, right? Talk about a Benedict Arnold, Mike Pence. Anyway, what do you guys think? Is he going to be the next president of the United States after Trump? But I love having him excoriate the legacy media like this. Just too much fun. Thanks for subscribing, everyone. We'll see you next time.